Well, good morning. I'm David Davis. I'm the founder and president of MSW Consultants. We're a solid waste consulting firm located in the city of Murrieta. And what we do is we help cities set trash rates and negotiate trash contracts. We audit trash companies. We do financial analysis for cities that have their own trash systems. And we help a lot of cities comply with the new recycling laws. I've been doing solid waste since 1986. I've been in the solid waste industry, and I've been doing consulting since 2000. And since that time, I've helped over 80 jurisdictions with their solid waste issues. And we only work for local jurisdictions. We don't work for trash companies because that would give us a conflict of interest, because a lot of times we're either auditing them or negotiating with them. So we can't be doing those things and then next year be working for them. So we only work for local jurisdictions. And the city, or I'm sorry, the district, please forgive me if I call it a city because I work for a lot of cities, but the district has asked me to facilitate this informational meeting this morning. And we're going to do that just to give you an overview. We're going to do some introductions. We're going to talk about the purpose of the meeting. We're going to talk about some solid waste program objectives that are common to all local jurisdictions. We're going to talk about the state recycling regulations, which you've probably heard about. And we're also going to talk about some industry trends that are apart from those regulations that are also impacting you and the district. We're going to talk a little bit about the waste landscape in San Bernardino County, which you're probably familiar. And then we're going to briefly go over the history of solid waste in Phelan Pinon Hills. And then we're going to talk about the CR&R agreement. And then we're going to wrap up by talking about the proposed changes to your system and the estimated costs of what that's going to be. So to start out, we've got Kim Sevi, who you know, Brent Spears, who you probably know. We were going to have a person from Cal Recycle, and I don't know if they're online or not.
Yeah, Ben Johnson.
Okay.
He's our Cal Recycle rep for the area. He is online, and I do believe we have a representative from the county here. Is that correct, Amy? If so, you guys can just unmute and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, good morning. This is Darren Mika, Deputy Director for San Bernardino County Solid Waste. And I believe we also have Susan Garrido and Sharon Mitchell on the call.
That's correct, Darren.
So Susan and Sharon and Darren. Yep. And then is Ben Johnson there on from Cal Recycle?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning, Ben. And I've got Caleb.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Yes, just Benjamin Johnson, Cal Recycle, local assistance and market development. And as Kim said, I am the LAMD representative for Phelan Pinon Hills in San Bernardino County. I look forward to working with everyone and hopefully having a productive meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ben. So the purpose of our meeting this morning is kind of two things. One is to discuss how the state recycling laws are going to impact the district, and then also how those laws are going to impact the residents and businesses in the district. And we're also going to be talking about the steps the district is taking to comply with those new regulations. But before we get into that, I want to talk about some program objectives. And these are things that are common to all local jurisdictions. So I think when you're talking to your friends and neighbors and they say, hey, what's the district trying to do with solid waste? A lot of it there's a lot of moving parts, but they can all kind of be boiled down to a couple of main objectives. And one is you want to deliver reliable, high quality collection service at reasonable cost. And secondly, you want to comply with the state regulations related to waste and organics diversion. If you can accomplish those two main objectives, that kind of encapsulates pretty much the whole solid waste program in the district. And then just talk a little bit about the solid waste laws that are impacting the district. There's mainly four, and they've kind of run a progression since 1989. So the one that was passed earliest on was AB 939. You probably heard about this over the years. And this is the one that required cities in local jurisdictions to get to a 50% diversion goal. And the way that it did that is it really prescribed a lot of monitoring and measurement. There was no required recycling. It was just local jurisdictions were required to implement programs, and also they were required to measure the amount of waste that was going into the landfill. And for years and years, that's how Cal Recycle promoted recycling across the state. And then in 2012 and 2014, what the state did is they said, you know, we're not getting enough participation in the commercial sector because AB 939 is really responsible for, in a lot of jurisdictions, you see the 3-cart system out in front of people's residential homes. So there's a lot of participation on the residential sector, but in the commercial sector, it was voluntary for a long time. And only like maybe 15 or 30%, depending on the jurisdiction, the commercial customers would participate in recycling. So what the state did in 2012 and 2014 is they said, okay, we're going to make it mandatory. Commercial recycling is now mandatory. So they did a lot of education and outreach, but as part of that mandate, there was no enforcement, right? So if you didn't comply with AB 341 or 1826, the state didn't fly down and write you a ticket. But all cities have had to monitor who's recycling and who's not. And there's been a lot of activity in that area. In 2016, what the state did is they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to require organics recycling. And the focus is on organics because of what happens in the landfill with organics. But basically, the days of cajoling people into recycling are over. And what the state has done is they've said recycling is required. And what they're going to do is they're going to require jurisdictions to enforce those requirements. And then in turn, the jurisdictions are required to enforce those requirements on their waste generators. And the goals of SB 1383 are to reduce organics going to landfill. So there's kind of two main goals. One has to do with organic waste, and the other has to do with recoverable edible food. So that is not waste. It's not ever thrown away, but it's just used by people that are food insecure. And the reason why they're wanting to do the organics is because when you put organic material into the landfill and you deprive it of oxygen, it breaks down and decomposes and turns into methane. And then that methane escapes from the landfill and it traps heat in the environment and it promotes global warming. So now you may, well, I'm just imagining in a community like this, there's a lot of people that are self-reliant and skeptical, but you need to understand the people that are in charge of our state. So if you can imagine that you are a representative like Ben, who might be on the 10th floor of the Cal Recycle building in downtown Sacramento, and he looks out his office window and he sees smoke. And we've had bigger fires up in Northern California in the last 10 years than we've had in our state's history. So you may not think global warming is a thing. You may think it's a hoax, but the people that are in control of our state, they do not feel that way. And it's very important to them to divert organics out of the landfill, because the more organics that are diverted out of the landfill, the less methane is going to be emitted, and that's going to reduce global warming. So I don't want to talk about global warming today, but I just want you to understand that that's what's driving this law. And there's really nothing that I or Kim or anybody at the district can do about this. Okay, so I just want to kind of lay that out there. I'm happy to maybe talk about it after the meeting. But you need to understand that this is what's driving these recycling laws. Okay, so now I want to tell you about the law itself. It's kind of divided into 6 parts. And basically all jurisdictions, so the requirements of this law are not required on the hauler directly. They're really required on the local jurisdictions. So that's the way this works, is you have a state agency called Cal Recycle, and that agency has authority over local jurisdictions. And they have people like Ben all throughout the city. They have dozens and dozens of people, and that's their job, is to enforce SB 1383. And what it requires, kind of 6 things. First of all jurisdictions need to have an organics collection system. And what a lot of jurisdictions do is they'll delegate this to their refuse hauler like CR&R. There's also has to be an edible food recovery program, and there are requirements for outreach and education. And there's also some requirements that jurisdictions procure organic content products. And this would involve mulch and compost that need to be procured. and also jurisdictions can qualify for this by procuring renewable natural gas that's used in the vehicles that CR&R uses. Also, jurisdictions are required to access the capacity for this material, because if only half of the organics are all going to the landfill, if we start mandatory collection and getting containers out in front of people's businesses and homes, that material is going to be more than what's currently being processed, and that is going to require new facilities, and there's a huge capital cost in that. And so local jurisdictions are required to make sure that their community has access to those facilities. And finally, there's a lot of monitoring and compliance and reporting that needs to happen that enable Cal Recycle to enforce this law. So those are the main areas of SB 1383. And I want to just talk a little bit about the enforcement process from Cal Recycle's point of view to the jurisdiction point of view. So what Cal Recycle does is every 4 years on every jurisdiction throughout the state, they will start a compliance evaluation. And what each jurisdiction is required to have is an implementation record where they keep records of all the activities that they do to comply with SB 1383. And then as a result of that compliance evaluation, if the jurisdiction is doing everything it's required to do, then they get a clean bill of health and they're probably good for another 2 to 4 years. If not, the Cal Recycle may issue a notice of violation, and they may issue one where they give you 90 days to fix what's wrong, or they may tell you that you need to complete a corrective action plan, and they may give you up to 24 months to complete that corrective action plan. And if that that plan is not completed after the end of the prescribed time, the plan will have some suggested penalty amounts. And the penalty amounts in the regulations are organized into 3 areas: minor, moderate, and major. So, and just up on the screen, you can see what these penalty amounts are for each violation for each day. So this is why a lot of jurisdictions throughout the state are pretty concerned about this law, because Cal Recycle has some pretty effective tools to making jurisdictions comply with these laws. So there's kind of 2 motivations. There's one, to create a more sustainable earth and keep methane out of the atmosphere. And the other motivation is to avoid being fined by Cal Recycle. In addition to these regulations that have come out, there's some trends that are happening in the industry that are more economic trends. And these are also creating upward pressure on the cost of solid waste collection. You may have heard about China Sword. About 3 or 4 years ago, China stopped accepting recyclable materials. So it used to be, Brent would pick up, recyclables, he'd take them to the MRF, he'd get maybe $15, $25 a ton. He'd receive money for those recyclables, right? And then they would bail them up. They'd take them down the port in San Pedro. They'd put them on one of these empty ships that are going to China, and it would be marketed, be used, right? The paper and plastic and things like that. So when China said, no, we're going to increase our environmental standards, we don't want this recyclable material from overseas anymore. So what happened to the market value of those recyclables is it just dropped. And sometimes it dropped when the ship was in the middle of the ocean. So now, instead of taking that and getting, $15, $25, now what Brent is doing, he's taking it to the recycle center. He's having to pay for them to accept, his recyclables. It might be less than what he would pay at the landfill for trash, but nonetheless, he's having to pay to get rid of those recyclables. So what used to happen is haulers, service providers would use the revenue from the sale of recyclables to offset their cost, and that would be part of their cost structure. But since China soared, that's increased their cost. So that's kind of we're still riding the tail end of that wave. And then the cost of new regulations is kind of self-explanatory. And the capital spending on organics facilities, for example, the CR&R's got a facility down in Paris near where I'm from in Murrieta. And, they probably spent, $20, $30 million to develop that facility for what is called anaerobic digestion. And we can tell you a little bit about that. And all across the state, people are having to build facilities to process organics and food waste as well. The other thing that's kind of interesting is we have a driver shortage for the last 3 or 4 years in the solid waste industry. And this is kind of a cultural thing. So it's really hard for trash companies to recruit and train drivers. And the other thing's interesting about the solid waste industry is that the drivers that are now picking up most of the trash are generally a little bit older, right? So a lot of them are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And a lot of these guys have been working hard and picking up trash for like 15, 20, 30, sometimes even more than that. And as they age out, there's fewer and fewer 25-year-olds that are willing to drive a trash truck. And it's just kind of a cultural thing that nobody can really put their finger on for me, but it's not going away. And as a result of that, it's creating upward pressure on wage rates. So a lot of these union contracts that have been negotiated recently, that's been a factor, right? So that's something that's happening outside of these regulations. The other thing is, as a result of COVID, we've got these supply chain shortages. So, and also I think steel tariffs have gone up. So the price of steel has gone up. So it used to be maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Brent could go out and buy a 3-yard cubic bin for $500 a unit. Now they're $800 or $900 a unit. And that goes to the trucks as well. So trucks are more expensive. They're more in demand, takes a long time to get them. So all these things are kind of building and creating upward pressure on the rates. So as a result, throughout Southern California, all of California, the rates that people pay for solid waste collection have been going up and up. So, and I've never seen it like this before. And I've been doing this for a long time. I can remember back in, 2010, 2012, things like that, interest rates were zero. Like if you went to your savings account, you got 0.25% a year on your money, and interest rates and the CPI were really low. So I would see trash rates, which are based on the CPI a lot, they would go up 2-3%, from year to year. And those days are long gone. It just seems like a memory. So anyway, talk a little bit about the solid waste landscape in San Bernardino County. And as you probably know, the county owns the landfills. They are operated by a private company called Athens, which also picks up a lot of trash in down below. And then, as you know, the county offers a dump card that'll enable for $85 a year that you pay. You can get 65 loads that you can take to the Sheep Creek transfer station. And then the county also has kind of a self-haul permit that they're in the works of developing. And then just a little bit about the history. When the district was adopted, I think in 2011, they kind of inherited the CR&R contract. And then after a certain number of years, they did some amendments to that contract so that it would comply with, the laws AB 341 and 1826. And I think that contract was most recently amended in, I think 2019, and then also in 2022, you guys amended that contract. And then, let's see what else. Yeah, and then you pass some ordinances, not the least of which is your uniform collection ordinance that was passed in 2022, which now requires everybody to have a collection service or a self-haul permit. And that's a pretty common thing among jurisdictions. And let me just tell you kind of why jurisdictions do that. Jurisdictions like to have a clean city, basically. So if they know that everybody has to subscribe for service, they know that everybody has access to bulky item pickup. Everybody's putting out their trash every week, or they have the ability to put out their trash every week, as opposed to maybe a system where you don't, like this. And maybe people say, well, I don't want to put out my trash. And there might be a tendency for those people to accumulate that trash on their property. So the idea behind mandatory collection is more of a community-wide benefit, where the community benefits from being a cleaner community as a result of everybody having access to weekly trash collection. So I think that was the thinking behind your ordinance, the uniform collection ordinance in 2022. And then as far as the district's compliance history with Cal Recycle, so AB 939 required jurisdictions to reduce the amount of waste that went to the landfill by a certain amount. And it started out to be a percentage, and then they converted it to a statistic called pounds per person per day. And Cal Recycle, based on the district's history, established a target that the city needed to fall below as far as its disposal. And it hasn't been able to do that. So the city has been out of compliance with AB 939 for a little while. Now, they are in compliance with AB 341, which is the mandatory commercial recycling, where everybody has commercial recycling, all the businesses. But they're not in compliance with, AB 1826, which is the commercial organics recycling requirement. And then also, when COVID hit at the same time that SB 1383 became effective. So SB 1383 was adopted in 2016. And at that time, they said, okay, we're going to start enforcing it in January 2022. So between 2016 and January 2022, we had COVID. So as a result of this, the state said, okay, for those cities that aren't ready for SB 1383, we're going to give you kind of a mulligan for the first year. And they had something where you could apply and do something called a notice of intent to comply, where you could not have to, you wouldn't be enforced upon for things that you did during 2022. But the catch there is you had to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, I'm out of compliance. And it's kind of a two-edged sword, because you kind of put a target on those jurisdictions back, but it also gave them 1 year's worth of breathing room. And the district applied for that. It was granted an extension for 1 year. But then also we have a Cal Recycle compliance order that they're currently putting together. Isn't that right, Ben? We've got a compliance order for the city, or I'm sorry, for the district. At this point, it's draft. Maybe he's multi.
Yeah, we're working. Hello, Eric. Yes, we're working on that right now. Okay, good. Yes, we're working on that. Actually, I am not in compliance. Just real quickly, give you a quick. I'm in Lamb. So as you were talking about, David, during that whole mulligan process, if you will, Cal Recycle split one branch into two. So some staff went over to jurisdiction compliance, some stayed in Lamb. I stayed in Lamb, and so compliance and Lamb are different, and we kind of communicate, but they are their own entity. And so any compliance questions, I'm just going to preface, that would need to be answered by compliance.
Okay, that's a good point. So when Ben says LAM, he's talking about that's an acronym for local assistance and market development.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they, so like you said, they have two halves of the house now. So there's the kind of the nice people that are Ben, and they're here to help you. And then there's the kind of the people that are charged with enforcing, and they're very serious about it. So they have they have dozens and dozens of staff, and that's all their job is to review the implementation record for jurisdictions and decide if they're going to be in compliance or not. And something I tell a lot of jurisdictions is I kind of make this comparison, because there's only so many people at Cal Recycle. So Ben, you're going to have to close your ears for just a minute here, but I kind of compare it to a pack of wildebeests running across the African desert, and they're being chased by a little pack of jaguars or cheetahs. And the wildebeests, I think, represent all the jurisdictions in California, and jaguars represent Cal Recycle. And what I tell my clients is, you just don't want to be at the back of the pack. You want to be in the middle of the pack or towards the front. And right now, the district, Phelan Pinon Hills, is at the back of the pack. So that's the compliance history. Talk a little about the waste contract history. I talked about this already a little bit. The contract started in 2011. It was restated in 2019, amended in 2022. And the district and CRNR are currently in the process of negotiating rates and services. And just to give you kind of an overview of what's in this agreement, when I think of solid waste agreements, I kind of put things into three categories: services, key terms, and rates. So in talking about the services that you receive in the CRNR agreement, there's the single family collection, where they pick up, right now they're picking up 2 65-gallon garbage carts in front of homes that subscribe, right? And they also do commercial, and commercial's based on the size of container that you have and the number of containers and the frequency of service. So there's kind of a matrix of rates. And they also have the exclusive right to do roll-off in the district. And in addition to just the basic collection services, there's also some services like bulky item collection. So if you're a subscriber to CR&R, you can do 2 on-call bulky item pickups per year, and those bulky item pickups entitle you to put out up to 4 items per pickup. And though you have to call them in advance, and it's usually on your collection day, but they'll pick those up on an on-call basis. And then I think there's also a couple of citywide cleanups every year that are also included in the contract. And I think there's also a shred day in your contract as well. So I think once or twice a year, people that I think I don't know if you have to be a subscriber or just live inside the district, and you can take advantage of the shred day. So those are kind of the services. As far as the terms, one of the big things on terms is the actual length of the contract term. And your current term with CR&R is a 10-year term, but it's also what they call a rolling or an evergreen term. So every year, I think on January 1st, as long as either CR&R doesn't notify the district or the district doesn't notify CR&R, it just extends for another year. So it's always kind of having a 10-year. So if in the event either party wants to stop the rolling thing, they just send the other one a letter, and then you start winding down over the next 10 years. There's a 10% franchise fee. So what happens there is all the money that CR&R collects from its ratepayers in Phelan Pinon Hills, of that, they take 10%, and that goes into the city. And then there's an annual rate adjustment. This year is kind of different because we're doing, I think, what the district is doing is what's called an extraordinary cost increase. So the way most contracts are laid out is that in normal years, you'll just get a CPI increase and the landfill. So there'll be a formula that takes some portion of the landfill, some portion of CPI, and they'll apply that percentage to all the rates. So, typically that would be maybe 4, 5, 6%, depending on what's going on with the CPI, what's going on with the landfill. The other thing that is kind of a key term is that CR&R is required to do a lot of reporting to the city. There's also a provision in there of liquidated damages, which are kind of a laundry list of things that a hauler might fall short on, and then what that might be in a damage. Like, so if they miss a whole route for more than a certain amount of time, the district can come and say, hey, in our contract, it says, if this happens, we're entitled to damages. So it kind of is the bridge between, total default on the contract and doing everything the way that they should. So that's the main terms. And then here, I hope you can see this. This is a table that shows the current rates. So the current rate for somebody who subscribes to refuse collection service is $30.98. And that's right now, that's billed by CR&R 3 months in advance. So typically what happens in the solid waste industry is that the residential service gets billed quarterly, and the bin service gets billed monthly, typically in advance. So some customers can have bins at the residence, usually a 2-yard bin. And then the rate that's being discussed right now is a range. I thought we had so we had a range. So what the district and CR&R are talking about right now, in order to comply with SB 1383, is to move from a system where they pick up only trash in the 265-gallon carts to a system where they pick up trash, recyclables, and organics in 3 different carts using 3 different trucks. And this is really, if you know people down below, this is a really common form of service for residential, where we have 3 carts. So that the price, what they're talking about at this point, is of a range of between $49 and $52. And I think the way and what they're doing is, so I'm not helping necessarily do the rates. I'm helping with the facilitating this meeting this morning. But I think what they're doing is they're kind of piggybacking off of what the county is doing. So the county is in the process of negotiating with CR&R, and the county's taking a deep dive into the refuse haulers' actual operating costs and things like that. And then I think what the district is doing is they're kind of taking advantage of all the work that the county's doing and using that to negotiate their rates with CR&R. Okay, and those are just tentative. So what's going to happen next is that the district is going to finalize the rates with CR&R, and they're going to take those to the solid waste committee probably in February. And then after that, that will be taken to the board in March. And part of the state constitution, there's something called Prop 218 that you might be familiar with. And what happens is with fees that are property related fees, they have to be noticed and there has to be a public hearing. So you have to go through a process to what they call a majority protest process. And what will happen is once your board approves the proposed rates in March, they will authorize a notice that will go out to all the ratepayers. And that notice will include a hearing date. And your board will set a hearing date that has to be at least 45 days after the notice goes out. And then during that period of time, people can protest the rates by writing or emailing to the district, and or they can attend the public hearing and protest. And the way the rules work under the Constitution is that if you have more than 50% of all the ratepayers that protest the protest the rates, then the rates do not go forward. But if there's fewer than 50%, then it gets voted on by the elected, your district board. They're going to vote on it. And once the district board votes on it, the rates will become effective. And if that happens, then these rates will probably become effective on July 1st. And as far as getting between here and there, the district is planning some public outreach that includes informational flyers, billing inserts, social media, website, a virtual newsletter, and some direct mail so that everybody understands what's coming and how it's going to impact them. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the Selfhall approach or anything about SB 1383 or any questions, anything you want to ask.
So just for our Zoom audience, and because we are recording this, if you do have a question, you have to use the microphone. Otherwise, it won't record and it won't go out to Zoom. So please use the podium if you have a question, and we'll start with our in-person folks first. I do want to point out, though, and make it very clear, the dump card for now will remain, and you'll still be able to self-haul. There's just a little bit more we have to do in terms of all of the tracking that we need to do for the state for recycling and our disposal tonnages. So number one question I'm asked, can I still self-haul? You absolutely will still be able to self-haul. We're just kind of in the beginning stages of ironing out that process and what it's going to look like and what type of information we can get from the county at the transfer station to ensure that we can meet our reporting requirements for CalRecycle. So self-haul will still be there. All right.
Just had two questions. One, will this slideshow be available online? Because I noticed, excuse me, people were taking pictures. So is that available online?
Absolutely. So we will post this in a few different sections on our website.
Okay.
And if for some reason you can't find it, just call the district and we'll be happy to direct you to it.
Okay, perfect. And then in regards to the protest, will we be notified in your different ways of notification?
Yeah, so we will do a mailing to all affected parcels, and then it will explain what's happening. It's a legal required mailing.
Right. But I know you said 50% of the people or more than 50% have to show up. How will we know what that number is? Like, is there 500 people in the district that do subscribe, or?
So this will be based off of improved parcels. So there's approximately 8,500.
Okay.
And so each property owner has a right to protest.
Right. Okay. But I'm just wondering if.
And actually the renters are allowed to protest as well. Anybody that would be affected by the service rate increase.
Okay. And then last question on the proposal, it would be 3 bins. So like myself now, I get 2 bins of just regular trash. So with that, you would be taking away a regular bin and now processing it with the recyclable and the organic waste, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And three trucks are going to be coming by. I know myself just recently in the last month had issues with my driver not even picking up the correct number of bins. So how is it that we'll make sure that who will we call if we notice that our bins are not being picked up correctly?
So that's what we're working on as part of this whole process in order to make sure we always have the data on hand should anybody show up from Recycle enforcement.
Okay.
The district's going to have to take over the billing so we can do the correct amount of record keeping that we're required to do. And right now we're talking with corporate about having a actual local customer service number. So you're not calling somebody who doesn't live in this area and doesn't understand what's going on.
Okay.
So there might be two numbers you call, one for your bill and one for, missed service. Depending on what corporate says, it might just be you call the district and then we will dispatch somebody to come pick up the missed trash.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peter Barnes. I also have a couple of questions. So number one, we don't have any preliminary rates about a permit for self-hauling yet.
We do not, because we have to do an analysis of how much staff time we think is going to be involved in issuing the permit, tracking the permit, and then gathering whatever record keeping we end up determining is going to be adequate to fill out data for Recycle.
But we think the record keeping is going to be kept by the transfer station itself, and you'll just be receiving that data.
So right now I can ask the county for disposal data. It's just going to show an aggregate amount of how much tonnage our residents dispose of there, because they track that through the dump card right now. And so what we're working on is ensuring that the county who operates the transfer station is going to be able to monitor all of the source separated items. So kind of what we're envisioning is you at your house, instead of putting everything into one container that you drive to the transfer station, you might have 3 containers, right? So trash, recycling, green waste, and then there's probably going to be 3 drop-off points at the transfer station. Because it's not just us that is having to do this. The county's having to do this for many of their service areas. So like Oak Hills. And so a lot of what we're doing is modeled after what the county's doing in a CSA like Oak Hills, because it's similar to us as far as density and dirt roads and things like that. And so we're kind of letting them pay for and do the legwork on all of these studies. That way we don't have to pay for, the time to do this. And so essentially what their rates are going to be are likely what our rates are going to be. So permit or anything like that.
Okay. The other question I had is on the rate increase for collection service. I've attended remotely several Recycle meetings over the last few months. And at those meetings, I've just generally heard that the average across the state for jurisdictions is about a $10 increase per month for organic service being added on to what was already being paid. So I'm just curious why we're looking at
so you live out here.
$19 to $22 increase.
So we are unique. So the state kind of sees us as like every other city. Like even our consultant calls us a city, not a district, unincorporated. And that's kind of like the mindset that a lot of the regulatory bodies have. They see us as looking like down below where everybody already has 3-cart service that have had it for years. They don't understand, like, we're so unique. We have only about 58% of our residents choosing to have collection service through CR&R. The rest are going to the transfer station. And then of those that have the subscription only service, we only have one type of collection, right? We have trash only. So
that's correct. So you're going from a single commodity, which is trash, which is a single truck, to now 3 trucks. And now you have processing fees as opposed to disposal fees. So you're processing it $75 a ton and you're disposing it at $59 a ton.
So we're not picking up recycling right now?
No.
Or processing recycling?
No. We pick up approximately 1,000 tons a month here in Phelan. We recycle about a ton. That's where we are right now. We have a small pilot program over here that we put together back in 1990, I think is when I started that one. And that was a volunteer program, and they've been pretty good about doing it, but that's the only area that's currently recycling.
So this fee is really $10 for organics and $10 for recycling is what you're looking at.
You can look at it that way. And so for SB 1383, for jurisdictions that already had the 3 levels of a service, because they're already picking up green waste, essentially what they're having to do is address the food waste issue, because you're not allowed to put food in the trash anymore. And so they're dealing with just having that component that's extra for them, plus, you know, all of the other reporting stuff. And so for them, they're already doing so much, it's not as expensive for them to implement SB 1383. Out here, we're really not doing much, and now we have to do everything. And so, of course, our cost is going to go up proportionally. Plus, you know, we're 2.5 acre average lot sizes. They're all right next to each other. So, you know, their density helps with the rates, and they have more people, so they have economies of scale. And, you know, we've talked to the state about this even before SB 1383 was adopted. We talked to all of our legislators up here about how this is going to impact us, but the state doesn't care. You know, global warming is a huge priority for them, and they don't understand that there are people that live in rural communities and they don't understand the way that we live, and they don't care that we're going to have to send 3 different trash trucks to collect 3 different routes down all these dirt roads. Well, that's a county issue, and there are some county representatives on here, but they do work in the trash side of things. If you do want to have a road paved, there is a county road management system online. You can go ahead and submit requests through there. I highly recommend it. Are there any other in-person questions?
Couple of years.
Okay, just a reminder to use the microphone.
Hi, Sharon Derringer. I just have one question. I noticed that you have a yard trash bin. Can we put like pine needles and, you know, tree leaves into the organic bin when we get that?
Not sure about pine needles. It depends on the processing facility.
It depends upon the processor. We're still working with processors right now to determine if they can go ahead and process that material. That's part of the reason for the rate range right there.
Okay.
So we're hoping that they will be able to take the pine needles. So at this point, I can only say that I'm still working with the processors to determine that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have enough pine needles for every week, but you know,
Yes.
maybe once a month or something.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we'll get a list of then everything that can go into the organic and everything that can go into the recycle.
Yes, we'll
and-
continue to do
like
this education
plastic
program
and
as we move
everything.
forward. That's why this is just the beginning tonight.
Okay.
So we will continue to hold these meetings so everybody is well aware of what they need to do,
All
what they
right.
can and can't put in the containers, and
Okay.
and
Yeah,
the
I've been
costs.
trying to do that, and then I just take it to the dump for their
Appreciate it.
recycling
Yeah.
program, but those would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we are working on trying to develop a local outlet. So out in El Mirage, we have an organic composting company that leases some land from us out there. And hopefully they're able to be permitted, county and state, to operate their compost facility, because that's a lot cheaper for us to take what's collected from the green bin to El Mirage versus, you know, out to Victorville if they're willing to take it, or down to CR&R's facilities. And so that's why that range is still there. And depending on where it all ends up, whether it's Victorville or a CR&R facility or a Circle Green facility out in El Mirage, that's going to determine what can go in the green bin, because every facility is different.
Hi, my name is Debbie McAfee. I am a 17-year resident of the tri-community, and I have never paid for trash service. I have a couple questions about Selfhall. Why do you feel it's necessary for Selfhall to have a permit? My understanding, and this is also for Ben Johnson, so I hope he can answer this question for me. Why, if both the county transfer station and the CSD are required to report on what comes through their agencies, aren't they separate entities? And if 52% of the people have trash pickup, those people are being reported through the CSD. If the other, whatever, 48% is being documented by the transfer station, that's 100% of the community. So why does the CSD need to monitor what the transfer station is doing? And why do I have to have a permit to pay for a permit to go to the transfer station when I've been going to the transfer station for the last 17 years? And on top of that, I have been in compliance with all of these regulations for the last 17 years. I have a compost bin at home. I separate my recycles out and either give them away or take them to the dump, which has a collection for recycles there already. And yeah, so why are we having to have a permit?
Yeah, again, that has to do with the tracking and the monitoring and enforcement that we as the CSD are required to do.
But the transfer station is required to do it also. And so why do you have to? I want an answer from Ben Johnson, not from you. Okay.
I don't know if he can address CSD related stuff, but go ahead, Ben.
Well, no, this is a transfer station question. They're two separate entities.
So you're talking about Ben Johnson at Cal Recycle?
Yes.
Okay. Ben?
Hi, I'm trying to get your name. I did not get your name. I'm sorry.
It's Debbie McAfee.
Debbie McAfee. Well, thanks for the question, Debbie. I will just say it's actually a local control question. Cal Recycle doesn't really get involved in how the jurisdiction or the CSD regulates or how they administer or implement the program. So it's not something that I can just wave a wand and say, hey, CSD, you need to fix this. It's something that within the confines of the laws that are passed, the jurisdiction or the CSD has the ability to implement the program based on their local needs, based on local control. So I would say it's not something that we could tell them you can't do this, but we would be able to maybe work with you, Debbie, and with the CSD, that being Kim, and with the hauler to say, how can we fix this? How can we mitigate this and make it less maybe burdensome? But we can't wave a wand and say, you need to do this because Cal Recycle said so.
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Debbie, we've met before. You came
Yes,
into
we
the
have.
office and we talked about this and we spent hours talking about it. We don't want to do this, but can I finish?
Yes.
Because I think I'll be able to answer your question and give some clarity to the issue. We have to ensure that every single resident is disposing of their trash properly. So if you don't want to have collection service through CR&R, you need to go to the transfer station, and get rid of your trash yourself. We need to be able for you to show us that you're actually doing that. And so I know you're a great actor in this, like you're very compliant in all of it. And, this is going to adversely impact you as it is all of our residents. It's just, we need to make sure that if you don't want service through CR&R, that you are actually disposing of your trash weekly as the law requires, and that you're source separating and that you're doing it. And so kind of what we're thinking of, and again, this is the beginning process, you're just going to say, hey, CSD, we're going to try to we're going to come up with an application process, but trying to do it on the website, make it super simple that I'm electing to self-haul. We'll note it in your account. We won't make you have collection service. And then we're probably going to have to get some amount to be determined of receipts to show that you're going to the dump. And the reason we have to have a permit is we have to gather the costs for doing this tracking. And we're trying to keep it as minimal as possible.
But if the transfer station is collecting that data, what are you doing?
So this is the two-pronged issue we have. Yes, the county operates the transfer station, but we are the jurisdiction responsible for enforcement, monitoring, and compliance of all of these Cal Recycle laws.
But doesn't the transfer station have to report to Cal Recycle also?
Can I-
They do.
So just a couple points. One is this is a common approach at other jurisdictions where they want to have mandatory service, but they want to allow people the opportunity to self-haul if they want to. So there is a permit system. So the district isn't just making this up. This is a model that you can find at other cities. And I guess what my question is somebody has to compare the list of people that have subscription to CR&R to the list of people that go to the transfer station. And the county, I don't think is going to do that. I think that's something that is a responsibility of the district. And I think that's the administrative effort that needs to happen on a continual basis, right? And I agree completely with this explanation. If every citizen was like you, Debbie, there would not have to be a permit system. But I do think that occasionally there's people out there that say, I don't want to pay for subscription service. I'll just haul my own, and they let it pile up in their yard. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Does that make sense?
What if you don't go to the dump every day?
Yeah, and we agree. You know, when I started here, none of these regulations were in place, and I never thought I would be a trash enforcer. You know, this is not anything that I want to do or our board wants to do necessarily. This is something that we have to do. And so we've been working on trying to make it as least impactful as possible, as least costly as possible, and, you know, as easy as possible. It's just, if you've seen it, Debbie, you've seen the requirements that we have to track, but if we could get other questions.
But
we
just
do
one
have
other
limited
thing
time.
I want to say, I mean, I've scanned through the regulation from the state, and it does say somewhere in there that self-haulers do not have to report.
For organics. So you have to remember, we're out of compliance with AB 939, which is the recycling component. And so we're addressing two issues with our program.
Okay.
Kim, could I, this
Oh,
Ben?
please. Absolutely.
Oh, and I just want to say, Debbie, heard the questions and the concerns that she raises are not unique, Debbie, and I can fully appreciate your frustration. And unfortunately, I'm not able to resolve it today, but hopefully with working with the CSD, Kim, and the hauler, we can come to some kind of understanding. But lastly, I just want to say we do care about the stakeholders. Cal Recycle has over 600 jurisdictions to work with. And so it's not an easy task, but we do care. So I wanted to kind of clarify that it may appear that we don't care, but we do care, and we do take our job seriously in trying to provide assistance to local jurisdictions.
Okay, next in-person question.
Yes, I'm Jeff Mullen. At some point, I'm sure the community would like to see any input on what it takes to get the self-haul and how long the punch cards will continue to be. Because by my math, you're asking us to triple or quadruple our cost based on what we're already paying in taxes, which they'll probably never take away. They'll just take away the dump card and figure out another way to keep the same money that they're taking already. But $400 a year, which is what people that are having stuff picked up at their yards are paying, and we're paying like $130 for that dump card or less. So that just.
So the dump card is actually, it's a county thing. So I don't know, Susan or anybody else from the county, if you want to talk about what the future of the dump card looks like, as well as those fees.
Hello, this is Darren Mika with the San Bernardino County Solid Waste. We have no intention of changing the dump card program at this time, and it is going to stay in place.
Okay. Now, regarding recycling, we need a better description of what you're talking about with recycling, because when you start talking about recycling, I think of aluminum cans, plastic bottles, and glass bottles. all of which I pay I pay at the grocery store when I buy them. And for the years, I've taken my own stuff to the recycler. So what are we talking about with recycling? Are we talking about other people that are not doing it? I mean, there's so much of a concern about other states people bringing stuff in from other states and so on. I mean, how long have we been paying a CRV, and why is there not been any type of focus on getting other jurisdictions, other states to do the same thing so that we don't have a problem with them bringing across the border from somebody else's stuff?
And great question. Regarding your CRV value items, continue doing what you're doing with them. I don't want those as recycling. You make more money with those than I do.
Yeah,
I
but
go
how
in bulk, so please continue doing that.
I understand
When it comes to
that.
the other items is what we're talking about, all the other paper products that aren't getting recycled at your local CRV collection place. Those are the items that are getting into the landfill that need to come out of the landfill. That's the type of items that I'm looking for
Right.
in our recycling containers. So we will give you a full list of what needs to go in there. But as far as your CRV value stuff, continue to, you're paying for it, take it to a collector and get your money for it. You do not need to put that into my containers. If you're not going to take it to a CRV, don't put it in the trash though. Please put it in the recycling container so we do recycle it. But I am after the other items.
Yeah, and then, recycling isn't just aluminum cans and bottles. So many things in the house are considered recyclable. So cereal boxes, tin cans, like your canned goods come in, laundry detergent bottles.
If you look on it at the bottom of any of your products that you purchase, there's a recycling emblem on that. Those are all recyclable items, not the CRV, just recycling emblem that you'll see on there, the little arrows. Those are the items that we want to get into that recycling container and not get into the landfills.
And
That's what we're trying to eliminate.
is the stuff that we take to the transfer station, at some point I understood that it was being taken to the MRF.
To my knowledge, I don't know that they MRF any of that material.
Who does use the MRF?
That they would maybe ask the county. They may know if any of that goes there, because that is a county-owned transfer station operated by Athens Disposal. So maybe Susan or Darren can answer that question for you.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. What, if anything, is done to monitor dumping stuff that gets dumped in the desert? Just today, I saw another place that there's.
See, that's another good reason to have mandatory collection, right? It
No, the
minimizes illegal
mandatory
dumping.
collection a lot of times causes that because they don't want to mess with it.
So there are ordinances and state laws that outlaw illegal dumping. It's just, I'm sure you're aware, we live in California. The burden of proof that somebody's dumping something illegally and then the chances that it's actually going to get prosecuted are slim to none. So it doesn't matter. You could put $1 million fine on it if you don't catch somebody in the act doing it. And then if the DA doesn't prosecute it or, anything like that, nothing's going to happen.
Now, is there any place that we're able to call to get that stuff cleaned up? Or
If you call code enforcement and tell them where it is, they'll add it to their roster of stuff to clean up.
the long list?
Yep.
Thank you.
I've called code enforcement and in the trash with their address and where they lived and everything, they still said, no, nothing we can do.
That's a question for the county. So I just recommend maybe call our county supervisor or call code enforcement. Just keep bugging them.
Hi, my name is Teresa Dunhouse. My first question is, we don't get a vote. We just get to protest.
That's correct.
Okay. Second, you're talking about not having enough drivers, but then now you're talking about bringing in 3 trucks. So you don't have to have way more drivers for 3 trucks.
That would be a question for Ben.
I'm just curious,
No, your point's well
You're
taken.
talking about global warming and all of this. Now you're running 3 trucks
Yep.
instead of just 1.
These
Yeah.
are all things we brought up with the state. We don't understand. Again, they see the state is looking like Sacramento or LA. They don't see communities like ours as unique, and they make regulations based on cities, not on us.
Now, who's going to be the trash Nazis? Who's going to go through my trash and make sure I put what's in there
We will be. So we're gonna have to hire somebody to go out with
So now
CR&R.
you're hiring more people.
We have to.
You're hiring now. That's why our costs are going up as
Correct.
high as they are.
That's correct.
You're putting your problem on us. Now you look, and then 3 trash cans. I want you to look at the age of most of these people in this room.
No, I agree with you. Like most
My
of
husband
our
is
yeah.
ill, has COPD. I'm dragging 2 trash cans down and 2 trash cans up. About 100 feet up and down my driveway.
I
And
completely
I'm sure
agree with you.
almost all of these people have the same situation.
Again, this is not something the CSD wanted to do. This is something we are required to do.
Well, I'd rather have a vote than a protest.
Yeah, the only thing I can say at this point in the game is contact your state representatives. They're the ones who passed this law that are requiring this.
Hello, my name's Catherine. On an earlier slide, there was a bullet point about projected cost for organics facilities to, the meatloaf that my husband is not going to eat. I can't put that in the trash anymore. I have to put it in that 3rd bin. I'm just wondering, in addition to these increase in monthly costs, are you going to pass on the cost for construction of this organics facility? I saw it on an earlier slide.
So we already have an organics facility.
Okay.
Well, we don't. We lease out land to an organic composting company, and they're in the
Okay.
process right now of
Updating?
doing that. Yeah, and so if they're up and running, we're able to take our organics there.
Oh, okay. So with everybody having 3 bins now and more meatloaf that they didn't eat, are they going to expand their facility to take on all of this extra food
Yeah,
waste?
it's a
Or
statewide issue, and I think Brent knows a lot more about this than I do.
so I'm just imagining that it is not just going to be $49.50. It's going to be more later on down the line. I just want to know.
I can't answer
Yeah.
a cost there. I can tell you that, yeah, there's costs involved in trying to
Yeah,
put these new facilities online.
right.
There's a huge permitting process.
So it's
When you
not the
start-
end of increased
you start
costs for
getting-
us.
Well, but
Yeah.
let me just throw it out there. If I had to spend $40 million
Yeah.
today to build a new one, that would be part of the cost. It
Right.
would be done.
Okay.
I wouldn't have to increase it after that. It'd be a set number. It's $40 million. We're going to go ahead and spread that out over 25 years, and
Okay.
that would be your rate other than COLA adjustments throughout the year. But I don't know what that number is.
Okay.
As a permitting process, there's cost of materials, and as was pointed out,
Oh, yeah.
there's just so many variables in this. It's very hard for me to
Okay.
nail that down. That's why you do see a range right there. I would love it if they could open up the processing facility that they want to here in Phelan. That cuts down transportation costs for me. So
Okay.
rates can start coming down.
Yeah.
I have to base this all on cost of operation, of where it's got to go and
Yeah.
what it's going to cost to process it. That's all I do. And I hand those numbers straight over to the CSD. They can go through those numbers. They look at those numbers. Those are audited numbers. I don't just come up with numbers.
No,
I'm just trying to make it clear. Just come.
I completely understand that you guys aren't the enemy. It's those stooges in Sacramento. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to make that point clear is that I've been here since 1964. I've lived in Wrightwood, Phelan, and Pinon Hills. In 1989, I happened to be the general manager of Wrightwood Sun Country Disposal at the time. CR&R came in. They purchased the company and kept me on as general manager. I've been providing service and serving this community for over 33 years. Before that, it was a service station up in Wrightwood. So I'm devoted to this community. I live here. I've been here all my life. This isn't something I want to do or CR&R wants to do. I love doing the trash. That's fun. It used to be fun. Now we've got Sacramento involved in this, and all these regulations have come down, and they've come down on the municipality. This isn't their choice. Just as it isn't my choice. We would rather not be doing this. This isn't a meeting we want to have. The self-hauling is great. It's always worked out fine. We have problems with illegal dumping, which is going to be addressed here in a moment, which we've always combated out here, and we'll continue to do it no matter what happens. But this isn't something that we have a choice in doing. We're trying to figure out a way to explain it all to you and come up with a rate that is reasonable. I've got to stay in business. I've got to keep doing it. And that's where we're at today.
My name is Scott Brown. I'm the president of the High Desert Keepers. We're a nonprofit organization that goes out and cleans up illegally dumped trash in the desert. Our position on this is we support anything that's going to be beneficial to the community and the environment. However, anything that is going to in any way increase the possibility of illegal dumping is going to be a problem. Having said that, I have a couple of questions about how this is going to impact us. We are a pretty significant self-hauler. When we do cleanups, we either use a 40-yard roll-off dumpster or we haul the trash ourselves to the transfer station. It's not going to be reasonable for us to separate anything when we're out there in the middle of the desert with a tractor cleaning up trash that somebody has dumped. And I'm curious as to, are there going to be any quantity regulations involved in this? How is this going to affect what we do?
You're talking about when you get a roll off to like clean up a private property?
What we're talking about is the roll off is one issue. The self-hauling is the other issue. But yes, that's.
Yeah, my understanding is that you have to, again, this is all preliminary. We're working with the county on something that's going to be manageable at the transfer station, but what it's looking like is you're going to source separate at your house or whatever cleanup site you're at. So you'll have to train your volunteers on that and then go to the different drop off points at the transfer station, this transfer station.
That's not going to be reasonable for us to do.
Yeah.
It's impossible for us to do.
And I agree with you that it's almost impossible.
Oh, it'll get cleaned up one way or the
again,
other.
that's
It'll
going
get
to
cleaned
be
up.
call code enforcement whenever you see an illegal dump site. And if they're not doing what you think is correct, please contact your representative because you have to say something for anything to happen.
Okay, obviously, I'm not going to get an answer to these questions, but please keep those in mind. And let's see if we can figure something out.
Thank you.
Morning. My name is Pat Bailey and I live out in the middle of nowhere. I have two horses that produce a tremendous amount of political promise. What am I going to do with the 1.5 yard or 2 yard dumpster that I have that I fill up with political promises, and then I have regular house trash? Give me a hint.
This is such a complicated issue because there are a lot of people out here that do have manure. And, you know, manure is actually one of those things that is not accepted at the transfer station using your dump pass. It explicitly states it on that sheet that they send you every year. And you're really not supposed to put wet manure into your trash dumpster. We recommend that you compost it. We are looking at having maybe a collection route for that. We're looking at having a drop-off location for that. And we're looking at what is an acceptable amount of manure that can go in these bins. Because the problem is it's so heavy when it hasn't been dried out that it will break the truck. And so the manure problem is a problem. It's something we're brainstorming. Because this is an issue you have, I recommend you come to our solid waste committee meetings. This is something we're trying to figure out how to address.
So what I'm hearing is you want me to build Bandini Mountain and then give it to you after I've built the mountain and it's dried out.
That's the preference, is it's not wet and heavy because it will break the truck.
There are two words that come to mouth. And the first one is bull.
Yep.
And we'll just leave the other one laying right where it is.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. Okay, do we have any online questions? If so, let's try to use the raise your hand feature. And then we'll call on you. All right, Debbie, do we have a last name? Debbie, no last name. Please unmute yourself.
I have a question. It's me, right? Is there going to be a consideration for a senior pricing? I've been out here for 38 years and 20 of them, it's only me living at my house.
Yes, this is Brent Spears with CRNR. Yes, there is senior considerations.
Okay, has it also been considered, and I don't think that should be based on how much a person makes. It shouldn't be, you know, I'm a needy person, so I need a senior rate. It should be the fact that I'm not generating trash like the 6 people that live in the house next door. Okay, also, I would like to know, are they considering in rural areas picking up trash every 2 weeks? Because
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
there's a few things. So there is state law, health code that requires that your trash is picked up weekly, and that's for vermin issues and all sorts of things. We are looking at perhaps an every other week pickup for organics and for recycling. And so we got to see what that looks like, and that would help with the rates, which is why we have that range. But, you know, we have to see how it's going to work out. This is January. We have several more months of trying to iron this out, and we will definitely keep you informed through our bills and through direct mailing and through our website and everything like that. And so that is an excellent way that we could cut costs. And then also, I do want to point out, we do have a de minimis provision that we're working on in our ordinance amendment. So if you are not out here very often and you have very little trash or no trash, or you don't have organics because you don't clean up your property, or, you know, who knows, we're going to have a process for you to apply for a de minimis exemption. Because I know that there's people out here that have maybe 1 or 2 bags of trash a month. And so again, we're going to have to track it. There's stuff that we have to do. There's a process we have to develop, but we are trying to keep all of this in mind. We understand the demographics of our community. Again, this is something we did not want to do, and we're working through the steps to try to make it as less awful as possible.
I'll talk about senior discount just 1 minute.
Yeah, there's not much.
Yeah, the district may want to talk to its attorney, because I've been in several jurisdictions where it violates this Prop 218, and what they say is, okay, you can do a senior discount, but you got to find that funding from someplace else. So the amount of money that is lost as a result of the senior discount needs to come up from some other place in the city's budget.
Yeah, that's correct. So we can't just say you're a senior, here it is. We have to come up with a funding mechanism for it. And usually those are done through nonprofits or some type of grant program, which you would have to apply for, because our rates have to be uniformly applied. Like, everybody has to have the same rate. And so, you know, for water, we don't have a senior discount. If we had a senior discount, you know, more than half of our people would be on that for water. And I wish we could have one, but we just don't have the funding on the water side of things to do that. On the government fund side of things, which is trash, there might be opportunities for that. And that's something that we're looking at.
And while we're waiting for the next caller, if I could just interject about the putting 2 more trucks on the street to collect the organics. You know, if you think about it from Cal Recycle's point of view, what they're doing is they're keeping methane out of the atmosphere, where your trucks put in carbon dioxide. So from their point of view, the methane has 85 times more the impact than the carbon dioxide. So just want to let you know that it's not a 1-for-1 trade-off between the carbon dioxide and the methane. So.
Okay, who's our next? Can you use the podium?
We're talking about that.
I'm so sorry. Can you please use the podium? Because otherwise we won't capture your voice on the recording, and the people on Zoom cannot hear you.
Hey, Chuck, what did you think? Yeah. Chuck McLean, methane lived up in the Bay Area for a lot of years, and they trapped the methane inside the dumps, and they piped it to people to use it. So I don't know what the big deal here is, trying to say this is going to do this global warming and stuff. Why not sit down there and spend the money and trap it and use it?
Well, the answer that I've heard is the collection system. So you'll have a modern landfill, and as they fill up that landfill, they'll put down perforated pipe, right?
Right.
And then as that methane gets generated, it gets collected in those pipes, and they'll combust it and they'll create electricity. So I think, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And I think the answer that I've heard is that it doesn't capture all the methane. Does that make sense?
Well, you're not going to capture everything of anything.
Well, I agree with you. And I guess that's what you'd hear somebody from Cal Recycle say, is it doesn't capture all the methane.
Yeah. And for this young lady talking about the drivers,
Mhm.
the reason why we don't have drivers is because your culture that you're talking about is loaded all the time and can't pass a drug test.
Totally agree. Totally agree. No, it is a cultural thing. We were talking about that yesterday.
Okay, who's our next online caller? Mary Lou, no last name, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Yes, all I want to know is what are you going to consider actual trash? Because just about everything is recyclable.
Once again, I'll explain briefly as far as what is recyclable is everything that has that recyclable emblem on there. I'm just going to leave that as a broad statement right now. There may be some exceptions to that rule, but most things are recyclable. That's why, once again, we can get rid of one of your trash and one recycle. So therefore, you shouldn't have much in the way of trash. When it comes to what is trash,
Paper towels that have
you could go on and on.
baby
Something
diapers.
that is soiled,
Something
the
that's
paper that is soiled or that kind of stuff, where Kim's going with that. Soiled material cannot be recycled. So I'm going to go right there. Other than that, you got your food's got to go in the organics, recycles go in the other. Hopefully you'll end up with a 10-gallon container of trash, and we'll be recycling and going with organics. But at some point we have a starting point, and it's 64, 64, 64. And hopefully we can reduce that.
Okay, thank you.
So you want me to have 2 trash cans in my kitchen? Well, actually 3, one for regular trash, one for recycles, and one for food. You want me to have 3 trash cans in my kitchen?
I don't,
And then
but Cal
yeah, we
Recycle.
just want that.
to leave this garbage in my kitchen for a week.
I don't. Cal Recycle is asking you to do it.
And how you do it, like, I tried it for
Wow.
a few weeks at my house to see how feasible it is to do the food waste. And what I ended up getting was a little container that I kept in my freezer, which, let's just say, it's not the most pleasant thing ever. And then I put it out on my trash day. And so, the logistics of it are kind of up to you. Again, if we have a lot of people out here who compost, so maybe come to our teaching garden and learn how to compost, and then you won't have to have compost service or green waste service. You can just pay for the other 2 levels. So that is a way to comply. You are allowed to do that. All right, next one, Amy. Ed Greeny, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Kim. I have a dumpster at my residence. Can you tell me how this is going to affect my dumpster? Am I going to lose my dumpster and end up with 3 or 4 trash cans instead?
This is Brent Spears. That'll be your choice. You can keep your dumpster, but you still will need to do recycling and organics. So the only thing that's going to go into your dumpster is going to be your trash, which I'm not sure that you would need 2 cubic yards. You're going to generate 2 cubic yards of trash.
I understand.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. And may I follow up with one? You had a speaker, Scott, who has a nonprofit organization that goes out and picks up trash from illegal dumps in the community. I think you missed the point. I think you thought he was discussing a residence to his question, and I'd like to hear a follow-up on it. He's going out with volunteers, picking up what was dumped in our desert, in our community, and he's taking that to the dump. Now, you referred him to code enforcement. Well, that's not the answer, because what's code enforcement going to do? They're not going to go out and pick up the trash. And if they do, they're going to do what Scott is asking you what the answer is. So will Scott have to have 3 containers when he goes out and picks up illegal dumping material?
Yeah, in order to be compliant with the regulations, he will have to, and he'll have to source separated before he takes it to the dump, because Yeah, and this is not, I agree, this is not easy. This is not the best solution, but unfortunately, we need to source separate. And so it's going to have to be source separated, whether he picks it all up there once, takes it somewhere and does it, or I don't know if they'll allow him to do it at the transfer station. Like, these are all variables we need to figure out.
Shouldn't be his responsibility.
Yeah, I think he's going to stop doing business, and you know what, that's going to happen. Anyway, thank you very much for your answers.
And again, you know, the state has gone into minutia on this one. Like Ben said, that it's up to the jurisdiction to figure out how to comply. Well, no, it's not, because the regulations have specified that we will source separate. We'll do all of these other things. We'll do all of this tracking. And really, there's really only a few ways that you can comply with this. Like, a solution would have been, we could have built a dirty MRF, right? So everybody can continue to just put it all in one bin, and then we leave it up to the professionals like Brent to separate it out. But, you know, CalRecycle, if you read the regulations, it says curbside service. So again, they're not taking our community into consideration. And then we can have a self-haul exception. So, all right, next one, Amy. Okay, if there's anybody else on Zoom, go ahead and unmute yourself and just say who your name is. If you have a comment or question. Okay, we have one more in person.
Yeah, my name is George Dubois. You're talking about doing the organic. Now you're talking taking your food, putting it in plastic, and then putting it in this trash can. Now we're putting more plastic in the dump that we're trying to eliminate putting in the dump by paying a fee at the grocery store to get a bag. And we don't want to buy these bags, so we got our paper bags. So what are we doing? We're just dumping this right in the trash can?
We're hoping it can go commingled and you won't need a plastic bag. But again, that depends upon the processor. Some processors can take it that way and others can't. So if it's cost effective to do it that way, that's what we'll do. If it's not, then we'll go ahead and put it in a plastic bag. So at this point, to answer your question, hopefully you can just commingle it and there won't be a plastic bag in there.
Yeah, the best case scenario is that you could just take your food and then go put it right into your green bin, right, without a plastic bag. But there's a lot of processors that can't take food waste into their facilities, and so they need it separated. And so a lot of jurisdictions, especially down the hill, they're requiring you to put your food waste in a plastic bag on top of your green waste inside the can.
Can we use our garbage disposals?
You know, I haven't been able to get a steady answer on that. I will tell you, it depends on what your septic system is able to handle. So keep that in mind out here. You know, when we had the drought, one of the suggestions was, oh, don't flush your toilet except when you have to. But our septic systems won't operate very well unless they have a certain amount of water. And we tried to explain that to the state, because even with the drought, they saw us as down the hill with lawns and median, you know, center dividers, all that stuff. And we invited them to come out here and look at us. And yeah, the flushing the toilet thing was not an option. And so same thing, garbage disposal. I haven't been able to get a straight answer on if you can just take all your food waste and put it down the garbage disposal and avoid all this. I could tell you, if you're on a sewer system, they don't want that. But up here, we're on a septic. So I guess it really depends on what you want to do to your septic system and what it's capable of. We have another on Zoom. What's the name? Cheryl Roden.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to go, I have a number of questions. I'd like to go back to the point that Debbie McAfee was trying to make about the Selfhall Permit and the requirements that are placed on the CSD to report to the state. So it's probably a question for both Kim, I think, and for Ben Johnson with CalRecycle. Her point was that between those of us who self-haul and those of us who have curbside service, curbside being, you know, a euphemism, you're at 100%. And that it's the reporting requirements from the state that are putting you in the position, I guess, of having to require a permit so that you can demonstrate that the agency itself as a jurisdiction under Cal Recycle is in compliance. The Cal Recycle laws do allow for the CSD to form what they call a district agency between the county and the state. If you were to do that, the purpose of it is to minimize paperwork. Have you pursued doing that? And the county folks, Darren and Susan, can answer this as well. Have you looked into doing that for this community, since we have around 2,000 folks who do self-haul, for the purpose of minimizing paperwork and to preclude the need for any sort of permit at all, since the Cal Recycle rules state that self-haulers don't have to report? And I have more questions, but that's.
Yeah, so for SB 1383, self-haulers don't have to report organics. So again, I'm going to point out, we have an AB 939 recycling issue that we're also addressing with our program. The big crux of the issue is the CSD does not operate the transfer station. And so we cannot tell the county how to operate it. We're working with them. So Cheryl, if they can gather all of our constituent data as they come through, so your name, and they can track the amount and type of waste that you're dropping off, and we can just get a report from them, that is a perfect world scenario. I just don't know what the capability is. And so if that's not something they're able to do in order to give us, like, you know, Cheryl went to the dump this many times and everything was source separated and this is her tonnages, right? We're going to have to track it differently. And so far, based off of what we know of how the transfer station operates, it's looking like we have to have a permit. So we know that you're going and you don't need to have curbside service, and that we're able to get some measurement of the quantity of recycling that you're dropping off.
A follow-up on that point and more questions. If you have a list of all of the customers, it's 5,000 plus and growing that do curbside, and if you have a list of everyone who gets a dump pass, which is all of us, why wouldn't a merge purge that separates out those who don't have service and simply show the names of those individuals without having to self-collect it through a permit process suffice for Cal Recycle?
I think I'm going to need that to sit in my brain for a minute. You email me all the time and call me. So if you want to reach out to me, I can put that on the website FAQ.
Okay. So
you answer that, Dave?
I have more questions. Is there someone else that wants to answer that?
Well, I'm trying to think of a efficient way to do that. And I think what has to be done is you have to take the list of subscribers on an ongoing basis. So I don't think you can do this once a year. I think you have to do it periodically. But you take a list of subscribers from Cal Recycle and you take the information that was received at the landfill, and somebody has to compare those every quarter or every month or whatever it is, right?
And then we have to reach out and get all of,
right.
You know,
and so if you have somebody who's not subscribing and not taking stuff to the transfer station, then they have to be contacted, right?
Yeah, and they'll be given curbside service.
Yeah. So I think the district is going to try and find the most efficient way to do it. And I think there are some electronic means of tracking that information, but at the end of the day, it's going to take a little bit of administrative effort.
Again, we're still in kind of the beginning phases of the whole, what we're seeing is a permit process right now. If a better way emerges, more efficient, we're going to do that. Because I can tell you, our staff does not want to have to issue permits, monitor permits, or anything like that. So if there's a way that we can get a data dump from the county for this, that's what we're going to do.
Great, because I think the Cal Recycle rules for self-haul then simply say that all you have to do is send out educational materials.
For organics, correct.
Correct, okay. Have you pursued an elevation waiver for the census tract that lies south of the 138? Because Cal Recycle allows elevation waivers for, I guess, just the organics, not
just the food waste only.
Yeah, it's not organics, it's only the food waste. So even though we have a very
someone's garbled.
Okay, so for our Zoom folks, since they can no longer hear us and we would have to do a complete system reboot in order to make it work, we're gonna put
I hear you now.
Oh, you can hear us?
I hear you. I can hear you.
All right, perfect. We can finish our meeting, so we have until noon. Did we have another?
I can't
in-person
speak for
comment?
Ed or Cheryl, though. Cheryl, Kim, I can't speak for everyone else. I'm just saying Cheryl or Ed may not be able to hear you. I'm not sure.
Cheryl, can you hear us?
I can hear now and I have more questions.
Okay, let me go to an in-person real quick and then we'll come back to you.
I'll just be really quick. Like I have my yard, you could call it weed abated every year. Sometimes it has to be twice a year. Is that something that's going to be affected with this? Are they going to be able to, and they use my dump card to go dump it off at the dump?
So yeah, that is a sticky issue right now. Even right now, if you want somebody else to use your dump card, you have to go through the assignment process, which is through the county. And so if somebody's cleaning up your yard, they're still going to be able, because they're actively cleaning up your yard, they're putting it in their trailer and they're going to go dump it. That's totally okay. As far as using your dump card, that's not okay. And it's not okay right now.
Okay, well, say I rode with them to go do it.
Oh yeah, that's totally okay. Yeah, if you're in the
really
car with
quick,
them.
Can't somebody like High Desert Keepers get an exemption? Nonprofits get exemptions all the time. They should put in place. And if that's something we have to take up with our local government, can you guys arrange another meeting so those guys come here and we can discuss it with them all at once instead of 150,000 phone calls that, basically get ignored anyway?
Yep. So again, the transfer station's operated by the county and
so get our county supervisors here so we can ask questions.
Yeah. So if they're interested in that, we are more than welcome to be the host for that, but that's up to them. So I can definitely reach out to see if that's something they're interested in. But I recommend that all of you reach out to your supervisor, which is Paul Cook and his staff, and express your concerns so that way they can work on something.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Unmuting. Okay. Yes. On the 218 election, you said the tenants will be able to vote as well. How do you plan to notify them if you're sending letters to the property owners using the assessor's list?
If we happen to have a tenant, so here's the thing: not all property owners or property managers let the tenant set up service in their name, right? So they'll just include either the amount for the utilities and the rent, or they'll charge them separately. If we have the tenant information because they're a water customer, or we can get the tenant information from a tenant account that maybe Brent has, so all of his existing customers, we will notify them. We're not going to know if every house has a tenant or not, just by virtue of how they set up their service. And so it is going to go out to the legal property owner on record, and we'll also send it out to all of the billed addresses as well. So it'll go everywhere that we have addresses for.
Okay, follow up on the 218 election and then one question after that. If there's a 50% protest, could you repeat what happens then? Doesn't it go to a vote of everyone, or was there some other process that I think?
But it just fails. If there's more than 50% of the property owners, then it just fails.
Yeah, I mean, Prop 218 is interesting. If you talk to Howard Jarvis, who sponsored Prop 218, they did not necessarily intend for these types of services to be included in it. It was more concerned with like, hey, we're just going to throw on this tax onto your property taxes because we want to build a building or a park or something like that. And so Prop 218 put a stop to that. They wanted property owners to be able to protest having taxes added willy-nilly to their property taxes. And somehow it got litigated that utilities, even public utilities, are subject to that. And so we have to do this with water every so often. As our electrical rates go up, everything else goes up, we have to increase our rates. And so for this, trash is also part of 218. We do 218s whenever we increase our rates. And unfortunately, there's a cost of providing the service. And if it fails, I would assume we would just have to keep trying until they passed. because we have to provide the service. And this is interesting. It has happened before with 218 where they have failed. And I think it was a water district. I don't remember. It's been a minute since I've taken that training, and they just had to do it again.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's a part of the law that says as long as the adjustment is based on a prescribed formula, you've only got to do the actual Prop 218 notice every 5 years. So you'll probably do the notice this year. And if it passes, and in the future, if rates are adjusted only based on the formula in the contract, then the district won't need to do the notice again for another 5 years.
Yeah, and that's correct. And even if you protest the rates, it doesn't make the regulations go away, and we'll still have to comply. It's just now it'll be very difficult because we won't be able to pay for the service in order to comply.
Okay. I want to make one point for the benefit of those of you thinking about how you're going to deal with manure, because you've made the point about it being too heavy. I've used a 3-yard for years, filled it with manure, nothing but manure when I had horses, and there was 0 problem. I'm willing to bet that the person who almost broke the truck scraped his yard and had rocks in there. A mistake I made once, never again. So do keep in mind that they can take manure without a problem as long as there's not rocks in there. And I guess just a point here that this meeting is being held at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. So I hope you're going to do another one just like this on a Saturday morning or something for everybody who works.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we have something unique like this, which fortunately isn't very often, we do a variety of meeting times so we can capture different audiences. So right now, you folks have the luxury of being available at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, and then we're going to get some Saturday workshops, and we'll get some evening workshops as well.
Thank you.
What's the thing at 4:30? That's our regular committee meeting. So we just go over district business related to solid waste.
I have a question.
Debbie, go ahead.
Okay, kind of went out of my head as soon as that happened. So is there not a way, because like I live in a track, which we don't have a lot of out here, I understand, but wouldn't there be a way like we could get a community trash bin for the food, or I don't know, it just seems like there's got to be something. Then there's 12 houses on my street, and on those 12 houses, 7 of them have 1 or 2 people only in them.
Right. And that's something we discussed. So for our commercial program, you know that, Debbie, that our downtown was built mainly a long time ago. And so we don't have the space to accommodate every single business having 3 levels of service. And so we're working with the individual businesses. Fortunately, we only have like 125 of them on if they can share. But the caveat is they have to be responsible for the penalties if one of or both don't do the right thing. And so I just don't see how it would be feasible to have a whole community with one, and then who's going to be ultimately responsible when trash goes in the green bin or green items go in the trash bin, and so on and so forth. So, really it's an enforcement issue. And then who gets let's just say they fail to pay the bill, then, who is responsible for collections? And then how does it get on the tax rolls if you fail to pay?
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, then one other question, just to clarify, like landscape clippings, like if I have a natural juniper and I clip off some clips and I throw them in my trash bin, that's the same bin I'm going to throw my food in?
The green one, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
And again, we're so early in this, we still don't know where the end source is for our green waste, our organics, whatever you want to call it. And once we know that, we'll be able to send out information, and we'll be labeling the containers appropriately on what goes in each bin. And then we want to work with you. Like, our goal is not, I really don't want to be the trash police. So it'll be more about education and be like, hey, we noticed, you had a bunch of recycling in your trash or whatever, and then just, help you.
I do have another thought. If somebody else asked this question about the dump card and they said that it wasn't going to go away. So we're going to have 3 bins for our trash and we're going to have a dump card that we can take what to the dump with. I mean,
all of your things that you're taking now, it's just you have a little added work, well, a lot of added work depending, of separating it into the 3 different types of waste and taking it to the transfer station and putting it in the correct pile.
What I mean is they said we're going to keep the dump card, which is in my world $85.14 on my tax bill. And then I'm also going to have at the new guesstimated price of $49.50, $594 a year that I'm going to be paying, or half of that if we start in July, that I'm going to be paying. So from July to December, I'm going to pay $300 for trash service, but I'm also still going to pay $84 for the dump. Why?
That's correct.
Okay.
So originally we had discussed getting rid of the dump card. So that way you're not paying for service twice, right? But a lot of people did not want that. They wanted to keep their dump card. So even if they're going to have service through CR&R, they have the option to also self-haul when they have extra waste or something like that. The benefit though is our disposal component, and Brent can talk about this, of the trash rate is offset by that revenue that is collected on the tax rolls, because it pays for some of the disposal costs. And so that rate that you see in the presentation, that would be higher if you guys were not paying for the disposal component on your tax rolls.
Okay, thank you. That does make sense there. So we are getting some kind of credit for that at least. Thank you.
Okay, so we're right at noon. Thank you everyone for being here. We're incredibly sympathetic. We understand our community. Please be on the lookout for in your bills or on our website for future meetings. And we'll do some more direct mailing. How many of you got the mailer, the postcard mailer?
That didn't say anything about this meeting.
It did. I have a copy of it over here. And then it also went out in the bills. Okay, so that works. So we'll probably continue to do that because it's a pretty cost-effective way to reach all of you. All right, thank you. And thank you to everyone on Zoom.